Man, what are these notes? I know I wrote them a while ago, but jeez, there's just so many grammatical errors. And it doesn't even matter, though, because nobody's going to care if they don't understand what I'm saying. Hey, Steve! Are you sure there's no way we can wire up the computer to feed direct audio to the camera? This laptop speaker makes me sound like I'm talking into a tin can while drowning in a metallic echo chamber. What was that noise? Steve? Are you playing Mario Kart in there? You told me boss said this was a tech-free camping trip. Don't ignore me, I can hear you losing in there anyway. Steve! Ugh. Imagine, if you will, sitting in your house on a quiet little farming hamlet in the rural country. The sun has begun to set after a hard day of work, and you finally have time to relax and unwind from the labors of your busy day. The wind blows across the fields as the smell of dinner your spouse cooks is filling the air. The only noise is of the farm animals settling in for the peaceful night as well. Suddenly, the ambient noise is broken. You're snapped out of your serenity by a screeching and raspy voice coming from inside the walls of your house demanding to be served bacon and chocolate. This is precisely the situation the Irving family found themselves getting into in the fall of 1931. The Irving family, comprised of husband and wife James and Margaret Irving, along with their 13-year-old daughter Vori, resided on the Isle of Man after James lost his job in the midst of the First World War. With this relocation, the family settled down in a quiet corner of the island, not far away from the rest of the community, living off of their contribution to the island's main export, livestock. All was relatively calm and peaceful for the Irvings, who were content to live in the quaint villa they now called home. However, this all changed when the entity known as Gef first arrived at their homestead. As the family settled in and the months passed, they began hearing noises coming from within the walls of their farmhouse. At first, these sounds were simple scratches and rustling similar to a rat infestation, which was not uncommon on the island. Unconcerned about the possibility of a few wild animals living in the walls, James decided to ignore the sounds for the time being. Yet, following the initial wave of bumps and scratches, the noises evolved in their nature, turning vocal, resembling barks or a baby's cry. Growing frustrated with the noises emanating from the walls, James eventually began growling near the walls to try and scare off whatever wild animals may have been living inside. In spite of his scaring attempts, rather than the growling bringing a stop to the noise, it prompted the unwanted dweller to growl back. Vori found the potential animal living in the wall to be amusing, holding one-sided conversations with the wall animal and reciting nursery rhymes to it as if teaching a child. As if learning from the young Irving, it is said that the present soon began to repeat back the nursery rhymes in a high-pitched voice, mimicking whatever else Vori asked it to repeat. After a few days of reciting nursery rhymes and poems, the repeating voice turned into one capable of speaking independently of the sentences it was given. Now seemingly able to communicate fully with the being living inside their wall, the Irving family asked all manner of questions, the most important being, "What are you?" The voice inside proudly proclaimed its name was Gef,
an extra clever mongoose,
who was born near Delhi, India in 1852, but died quite recently. He stated that after his death, when choosing his ghostly form, he decided to remain a marsh mongoose when apparating, as it was easier to live his afterlife in a form he was familiar with. At first, Gef continued taking pleasure in the role as an unwanted visitor, purposely banging on the walls and letting out loud, devilish laughter to echo through the house. As Vori continued to converse with the mongoose, though, he began to ease up on the traditional haunting behaviors one might associate with a malevolent spirit. The first time any of the family saw Gef was one evening when James was sitting near a window of the house. In the distance, he spied what he described as a large tiger-striped cat with a bulldog-like head. As the Irvings didn't own a cat, James called Vori to look at the animal. Frightened by the size of it, James hurried outside with a rifle to scare the animal off the property in the worries it may hurt some of their livestock. James followed the animal at a distance for a while before stating that it had simply vanished after passing through a gate into an open grass field. when he told Margaret what had happened once he returned. They heard Gef reply through the walls.
It was me you saw, Jim.
Despite being an uninvited supernatural presence within the Irving's house, what little malice Gef greeted the family with soon disappeared, and he quite quickly became a beloved member of the family. Instead of being treated like a pet, Gef was as welcome as a long-lost relative would be, treated as an equal to the rest of the family. Gef consistently held conversations with Vori and kept her company while her parents were out working on the farm or in town. During the day, Gef claimed he would often hitch a ride into town and wander about, bringing home the latest local gossip to talk about with the family while helping around the house with laundry and other chores. However, like mongooses, yes, that is the proper plural of mongoose, tend to be, Gef remained mischievous and a recurring nuisance. He liked to make it known to the entire family when he was hungry, demanding Margaret cook his favorite treat of bacon with no fat. After all, the lean was his favorite part. When his food was served, Vori said that they would often see small white paws reach out from crevices within the wall, dragging the bacon out of sight. Aside from food, Gef also wanted entertainment provided for him, and whenever Gef was bored or tired of singing to himself, he would yell at the nearest family member to
"Put the bloody gramophone on!"
Along with making demands from the family, Gef had a variety of phrases he enjoyed shouting at random when he was bored, his favorites consisting of
Chew coke.
And
Nuts.
And
Put a sock in it.
Gef also loved to make grandiose claims about his power and how special he was, screaming,
I can split the atom. I am the fifth dimension. I am the eighth wonder of the world.
The mongoose also liked to boast about his vast knowledge of the world, bragging to the Irvings about how experienced and well-traveled he was in life, expressing this by talking in various different languages. He also boasted about knowing a variety of things about the supernatural, the world he claimed to call home before he lived with the family. Although he claimed to retain his mongoose form when returning as a spirit, Gef would often make contradictory statements about his appearance, stating,
I'm a freak! I have hands, I have feet, and if you saw me, you'd faint. You'd be petrified, mummified, turned into stone, or a pillar of salt.
In lieu of the ghastly appearance he spoke of, the Irvings on many occasions asserted that Gef remained to have the appearance of a normal mongoose. As word of this alleged creature spread around town, the Irvings were inevitably visited by all manner of paranormal researchers and investigators. While many of the townsfolk either grew passive about the phenomenon or simply did not care, the investigators spent large amounts of time trying to decipher what Gef could truly be. Some paranormal researchers theorized that Gef was an example of a tulpa, a type of entity brought to manifestation in the physical world by a large amount of thought dedication. Perhaps the young Vori, lonely in the new house, created an imaginary friend for herself to keep her days occupied, unaware of what the friend would grow into. Other researchers simply believed Gef to be a spirit or extraplanar entity that had taken residence in the Irving's house. As the Isle of Man was no stranger to folklore of fairies and fae-folk, this concept was more widely thought of as plausible by the island residents. Now, of course, whenever visitors came around, Gef was quick to retreat to his hiding place in the wall. Only 2 or 3 other islanders had ever heard his voice, and he very rarely interacted with the investigators aside from throwing rocks at their heads. Yet, once the investigators left, Gef was quick to discuss the men, giving his opinions on which ones he liked and disliked the most. The only physical evidence told to be left behind by Gef were a few paw prints and fur, which was written off as belonging to the family dog given the size of the prints and texture of the fur. With a lack of physical evidence and a hesitancy by Gef to interact with the researchers, folks were left wondering if Gef ever truly existed at all. In 1935, historian Richard Lambert and paranormal detective Harry Price visited the Irving household. Upon investigation, the two noted that the interior of the farmhouse walls were abnormally hollow, theoretically allowing any noise made within the walls to be carried to any other point in the house through the wall as one large sounding board. Other detractors stated that Gef was simply an impressive ventriloquist act by Vori Irving, who had learned to throw her voice and fool other people, a point that was vehemently denied by Vori. After James Irving's passing in 1945, Vori and Margaret sold the house and moved away. A year later, it was reported that the house's new owner had shot and killed Gef, displaying the stuffed corpse at the homestead. Vori, though, denied that the body belonged to Gef, stating that he had moved on to another place as well after the family left. Unfortunately, as the last member of the family to be acquainted with Gef passed away in 2005, the current status and whereabouts of the infamous talking mongoose is left up to conjecture. Perhaps Gef remains out there in the world, taunting scientists and paranormalists alike as he travels from place to place with knowledge only he is privy to. After all, one of the only reported sentences of him speaking to an investigator was,
"If you knew what I knew, you know a hell of a lot."